1, 2, 3. It's Rob Macfarlane here, and today we're going to be going through 5 formatting tips for your next script. I think we've all been there. The first time we write a script, we just bosh everything out and we're just hitting it and it's all going brilliantly, and you finish your script and you're like, oh my god, this is just brilliant. And then you send it to someone to read and give you feedback and they're like, I just couldn't get into it. You know, it's cool, I like the story, but it doesn't read well. And this is probably the biggest problem I find with most scripts. And there are certain rules that you can bend a little bit, but if you cross over too much, they actually push your reader out of the experience of the story that you're trying to give them. So I'm going to go through 5 ways in which you can ensure that your script is absolutely readable and ready for someone else to experience your story. So number 1, I'm going to talk about one of the most egregious of sins that I think we've all probably fallen victim to, especially the director-writers out there. That is writing directions into your script. Of course, why would I not put my ideas down in my script? No, the script's not for you. Really, just don't do this. The script is actually not for you as the director, not at this stage. You have to approach your script as a script writer and not a director, which means don't be putting in things like, we see a close-up on the man's fingers as he grips the steering wheel, or we see a low angle on a woman as she stands angry. What's the problem with this? What we're doing is we're making the reader aware of the camera and the filmmaking process instead of keeping them within the story. So what would that sound like if we got rid of the direction? Instead of we see a close-up on the man's fingers gripping the wheel, maybe instead the whites of his fingernails show as he grips the steering wheel. Instead of we see a low angle as the woman stands imposingly in front of the crowd. The woman stands towering over the people in front of her. We understand it, we can see it in our mind. Now it's up to the director, the crew and the cast to interpret this in the story. Oh dear, yes. Another one I get quite often in a lot of scripts is the very first line or paragraph about a particular character. When we meet them, I see description about the character which is not visible. And what I mean by this is when the description says Tom is an aggressive 30-somethings businessman, or Sally is a rude, short-tempered teenager. But it's not something visual, and really and truthfully, scripts need to be constantly visual. They need to be something that we can interpret onto the screen immediately in that very second. What would that mean in terms of trying to eradicate this, to make it easier to read? Well, instead of saying that they are rude and short-tempered or aggressive, instead show that through their actions. If they're rude and short-tempered, make sure their dialogue is rude and short-tempered. If they are aggressive, maybe their actions, the way they enter an elevator, the way they sit down is aggressive, the way they write is aggressive. Put that into their character rather than just saying, well, you know what, you're gonna have to read it with this filter on because I've told you that this person is rude and short-tempered. Someone who's rude and short-tempered can also be soft and gentle and timid given the right situation. So ultimately, by describing your character with these intangible words, you're actually restricting your character's depth and breadth in the reader's eyes. This one's a biggie. I see this in a lot of scripts, again, especially short films, where they try to force the actors to play a particular line in a particular way. This is really, really damaging because it actually stops the actor from giving multiple readings on a particular line or dialogue or character as well. By putting next to a person's dialogue how they need to read it, like shouts or whispers or angrily or somberly. We end up pigeonholing the actor into acting instead of being the character. As soon as the actor is trying to act with a particular emotion, they're no longer present in the scene with the other actors. And this is so important to remember. As a writer, remember that your actors can only create a true emotion off of the other character in the scene, in the room with them. And this is how they act. So as writers, you do really need to understand how all of the other cogs in this machine works, so you can do the best writing for those people, for those craftsmen, those artists who are going to bring your story to life. What would the solution to this be? Well, first and foremost, get rid of any time you tell an actor to feel or act in a particular emotion or way. If you're telling them how to deliver a line, get rid of it. If you feel that this character must say this line in a particular way, then you've got to make sure that the actor can read that in the way the character is set up for that scene, the way the character is, what they believe, how they normally act in various scenes and sequences. At the beginning of Aliens, we get an incredible experience of each of the characters in the scene, and the way in which they react to each other in their dialogue actually gives us a great idea of the type of character they are. If they're loud and bombastic, or if they are fragile and they are anxious.
The food is terrible. What's say if you got any biscuits on there?
Here's some cornbread. I am cold.
Still with us, Brett? Anything so bad, man?
Right.
Yeah. I feel dead. Anybody ever tell you you look dead? Oh yeah, right.
You're in your script and you're writing through the story, it's going so well, but you've come to a climactic point and you've got your two characters who have to come to blows. Be it a punch up, a sword fight, a gunfight, a car chase, and I know it's really, really difficult to actually come up with the exact moments and actions of each character, but please push through. Don't just write and they have a car chase. Instead, take the time to work out each beat of the action. This enables you the chance to embed your character and your story into the action, and this can really enrich and raise the level of your script. Finally, and this is something I know a lot of early writers really struggle with because they want to really embed the reader in the world, they end up over describing everything, especially the locations. And what ends up happening is you end up with these big chunks of text about how the door creaks and how the window rattles and the wind howls, and they haven't even gotten to the characters yet. What's ended up happening, therefore, is they've treated the script like it's a novel instead of remembering that ultimately your script is at the service of the story constantly. Therefore, if we have to know something about the building or environment or location that they are in, it's got to be relevant to the story. If you need the character to turn around because they're going to see a shadow moving, then you've got to make sure that we understand that there's a reason for them to turning around. If it is that the door creaks behind them, then yes, write that in. But don't overwrite every description. When they turn around, the corridor is enclosed in darkness, but the door creaks as a shaft of light comes in through the window. No, you can be more succinct. You can tell us exactly what we need to see, when we need to see it, as fast as we would see it on the screen. So the rule of thumb is, if your writing is slower than the actual speed that we would have seen it on screen, then it's too slow for your script. So, if there's a crack of thunder, don't write, and then the room flashes with a blinding white light as a crack of thunder reverberates around the room, leaving everyone in a state of panic. No. Everyone is blinded by a flash of light and a crack of thunder. That's it. Everyone's actions, interactions, and dialogue should let the audience know that they are disorientated and how they react to this crack of thunder, to this shock. At the end of the day, they have to imagine the film this is going to be, not the script. They have to imagine the film that your script will become. So in review, take the direction out of your script. It's not necessary, you don't need it at this point, you've got to tell the story. Describe your characters through their actions and their dialogues rather than giving intangible words like angry or frustrated or serious. Don't tell the actors how they're meant to feel at any given time. They don't need it, they should be able to interpret that for themselves. When you get to your big car chase, your big punch up, your gunfight, your sword fight, write out the full action in its entirety. Get us inside the action and how the characters are going to deal with this. It's going to enrich your scripts. When it comes to your locations and the environments of your characters, only give us the information we need to tell the story. The rest of it, leave it up to your cast and crew to find those locations. Thank you for joining me today. If you found today's content useful, subscribe, hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of the further episodes, which are coming out on Mondays and Thursdays now. As well, check below for some links to even more content on how to raise your game on your next film.